content releases, unfortunately, work does tend to get in the way. I hope you enjoy this video, and please continue to subscribe and write in the comment section for your favorite topics. I thought today's topic would be especially relevant given the recent events near Moscow and in the Black Sea, which involved Ukrainian drones. Before I get into a video on drones, I'd like to clarify the drone universe a little bit. What are we going to be talking about today? So at the one end, we have the heavy hitters, the big boys, things like the Reaper or the Global Hawk of the US. These are the biggies and baddies of the drone world, highly specialized, full of advanced technology, costing as much as a manned aircraft at times, and very, very, very unattritable. We are not going to be covering those today. Now, at the other end of the spectrum are micro drones. The idea with these being that you hold a swarm in your hand and release them for ultra short range operations and with flight times measured in minutes. I won't cover these as well for the reason that we haven't seen them widely used and little is actually known about them in the open space. They're still very experimental platforms. That is a Black Hornet prototype being developed by the United States. Now that leaves us with the middle of the spectrum, which encompasses everything from Bayraktar to Mavics fitted up with grenades. So we're still talking about quite a large variety. However, today we'll focus on the larger end of that spectrum within a spectrum. The naval variety of drones, which we'll also cover today, is much more recent and much less diverse, with only a few models being tried out right now. This is an area where much of the cutting edge of surface unmanned vehicles is on display right now in Ukraine. You can see some of the examples of the evolution of Ukrainian drones in this picture down here. Now, that's except for unmanned submersible drones, but again, not much really there in the open space on them. You can imagine that Ukrainian companies, there's one in the UAE right now that is working on submersible unmanned drones for fairly obvious reasons. Now, the ground variety of drones, well, there are some ideas out there. Currently, the only things we've seen are BMPs rigged with explosives and driven through minefields and a very inefficient mine-clearing solution to use something the size of a BMP. I do not think that we need to be covering resurrected Goliaths anytime soon. Alright, so the genesis of the long-range drone war in Ukraine begins in summer 22 when Russia, its stocks of conventional missiles are beginning to run low. It buys hundreds and hundreds of Shahed-type drones from Iran. These do not arrive until October, but when they do, they're used to pelt Ukrainian cities, and they manage to cause some serious damage with their 170 to 100-pound warheads. At first, Ukraine was reduced to having cops fire blindly into the sky with AKs. However, this incredibly effective means of anti-drone artillery was quickly supplanted with more effective solutions. Each of these solutions are also, of course, ancient. That is a dushka mounted on a truck with another truck carrying a searchlight. This is actually an effective solution to the Shahed problem, believe it or not. I am sure that the history amongst us are thrilled to see that Ukrainians are manning the same searchlights and anti-aircraft guns that their grandfathers used 80 years ago. Nonetheless, Ukraine quickly realized that some form of domestically developed long-range strike capability would be essential to reach into Russia and deny the Russians a cross-border haven. And this capability would have to be domestically developed since the West would not supply one for them. So Ukraine took a look at the Shahed and decided to out-Iran Iran, because this is what they came up with, the Beaver, right here. Now, the Shahed is a technological wonder compared to the Beaver. The Shahed has 3 different redundant guidance systems, the Beaver 1. The Shahed is twice as fast, flies twice as far, and carries about 20 times the warhead. But you can make a Beaver from some wings, a lawnmower engine, and 5 pounds of C4. It's got enough range to get to Moscow, as we've recently seen with the drone strikes on Moscow. And compared to the Shahed, the Beaver is a lot cheaper. I'd like to clarify that this is no wonder weapon. It could probably get shot down by a kid with a .22 rifle. It is hideously vulnerable to electronic warfare. Its warhead won't do you any harm unless, of course, you happen to be right next to it. But did I mention the part about how easy it is to make? Ukraine can ship these things out by the thousands. And that is the key here. The key to any drone is how easy it is to make and replace. How attritable is it? And in this category, the Beaver excels. It's in numbers that it truly becomes dangerous. You could probably produce 600 Beavers as compared to one Su-34 attack aircraft. And if 600 Beavers are sent to attack a Russian airbase, then even if they suffer an 80% loss rate, 120 have still gotten through. At which point, 120 of anything are going to do some damage to a squadron of jets on the ground, presuming that they can be guided into hitting those jets. Will the Shaheds actually become dangerous in terms of Ukraine, or are they going to be a minor nuisance at best? The reason why the Shaheeds have truly not yet been dangerous goes back to mass. Russia launches them in penny packets, 30, 40 at a time. Now, this could change. Russia could start launching them by the hundreds, and then the Shaheeds will be a real problem. Now, whether that scenario comes to pass depends on many things. How many drones will Russia get from Iran? How many resources will Russia decide to devote to making them on its own? Will the Russian armaments complex ever purge itself of corruption to become an efficient enterprise, and so on and so forth? Is it likely that all of those things will happen? No, of course not. It is very possible, however, that Shaheed numbers rise and make this drone a real threat. So how do we then achieve mass if it's so important? Because mass is so key, the drone wars are going to be where World War II style mass production of attritable airframes comes back into its own. You can see the well-run B-24 factory from World War II on the right in this screen. One key takeaway from World War II and mass production is that designs must be finalized early. The U.S. used two heavy bomber types for almost the entire war. The B-17, the B-24, the B-29 did not enter service until very late in the war. It then upgraded those types on a planned schedule that allowed their factories to adjust their tooling and production processes to meet the new upgrades in a rational way. In contrast, each German aircraft spawned about a dozen upgrades. Most of these were seemingly implemented at random and caused general chaos to the production line. In fact, a lot of what Albert Speer did to achieve his, quote, armaments miracle, unquote, involved concentrating on a few models and freezing designs to stop random changes every other week by people who could simply not let go of "wouldn't it be great if." And this sort of design freeze is one area where the least complicated design, the Beaver, is going to gain the advantage because it's so simple anyway. Secondly, for Ukraine, which has a problem in achieving mass because any giant factory like Willow Run will be a target for Russian strikes, then mass production can be achieved in a number of ways. The simplest is to build a factory in Poland right across the border, perhaps offering the Polish arms maker HSW a stake. But if for some strange reason the Polish government would like to pass up a chance to get back at Russia, Ukraine can also adopt dispersed production, known as cottage industries, where small factories are located in every small town or village. This is slow and it's inefficient, no mistakes about that. It is how Britain built its Spitfires in 1940 and 41, and it is so important for Ukraine because it possesses the key advantage of redundancy and survivability. After all, you can hit a factory, you've only lost a tiny percentage of production. I would like to turn to the naval side of warfare here just for a moment before we move on to the countermeasures. Naval drones are much newer compared to UAVs. So far, only Ukraine has used them, probably because Russia possesses a major fleet in the Black Sea and has little need of them. Ukraine's naval drones are models of simplicity even compared to the Beaver: an engine, some fuel tanks, a GPS, and a couple 100 pounds of explosives. Nonetheless, they've recently been proven to have a range of hundreds of miles by attacking Russian warships off the Kerch Bridge. Their warhead size alone, a couple 100 pounds, makes them a threat, especially because as low-slung and close to the water as platforms like these are, they can get in close before radar on a ship can see it, rather like a sea-skimming missile. And with a fairly high terminal attack speed, they can be very deadly to slow-moving ships like LSTs or oil tankers that have inferior radar suites and slow speeds. Now, I wouldn't want to take on a modern Russian frigate without a couple dozen of them, but that just brings us back to ease of production, and you can turn these things out by the hundreds. The uses for them can also be far more innovative as time goes on. You can replace the explosives with a torpedo to provide some standoff range. You could replace the explosives with mines and seal Sevastopol harbor shut. You could even use them to tow sonar arrays and hunt for Russian submarines. Again, these are not wonder weapons. They have the weaknesses of a low cruising speed. They are probably vulnerable to electronic warfare, and just one bullet into them will result in explosions that rival a Russian turret toss. But yet again, we are coming back to the fact that you can build literally hundreds of them, and it is mass, which they can provide, that is being decisive in the war. So now, after having conjured up visions of how Iran's Shaheeds can demolish anything in their path, let's turn to countermeasures. How do you stop these? There are a number of solutions. The first of which involves using EW to make them fly to the wrong target, crash, lose lock, even self-destruct. EW is probably going to be effective because these are cheap platforms and not well defended against such attacks. But the Shaheed has 3 different independent guidance systems to frustrate this exact sort of attack. The next solution is the straight-up kinetic one. This is also not that hard. Shaheeds don't carry much armor, they're slower than an average World War II fighter plane, they're not exactly quiet. The Beaver is even slower than a Shaheed. Truck-mounted heavy machine guns are a very real solution. More sophisticated systems like Gepard eat Shaheeds alive. For using longer range, then actually old World War II heavy anti-aircraft guns is really a very good idea. The British 3.7-inch gun, which you can see on the right there, had a range of about 7.5 miles out, 30,000 feet up. It fired 15 rounds a minute. Using modern autoloaders and propellants that could easily be exceeded, and with proximity fuses and radar-guided aiming, accuracy would actually be quite good into the middle of a swarm of Shaheeds. But perhaps the best key to all of this is to simply see these things. If you can see them from far out, you can kill them. If they get in close, you will get hurt. End of story. That means good radars and sensors. Sensors, sensors, sensors. It might, for example, be a good idea to have your search radars on in a war zone, unless you prefer your surface warships getting promoted to submarines. Now, thank you all for watching. I do hope this was enjoyable. I am going back to school soon, so I don't know how much new content you can really expect. But I will try to post new stuff as often as I can, so don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to see your ideas get turned into future videos. Thank you again, and good night.